Hello and welcome to the fourth and concluding lecture of this short series, which has to do with ICH, climate risk, everything concerning climate variability, intangible cultural heritage, of course, in the context of Mongolia and the ICH of Mongolia. And excuse me, in today's lecture, what I'm going to present to you and also discuss with you is quite a bit of the beaten track about ICH and climate change. By beaten track is meant the work that we have done so far over the last several years on ICH and climate change. I'm saying beaten track, but in fact, as you know, there isn't that much of a track, which is something that we hope to be able to change in the next couple of years, especially with the workshops such as this particular one and hopefully other ones in Asia, which will come either with the category 2 centers individually or even better in collaboration and in as many of the, I would say, distinct Asian biomes and bioregions as possible, because as you know very well, when we have coverage of different kinds of bioregions and geographies, then of course we also have coverage of different kinds of ICH, different kinds of ICH domains, and this is something that you know very well. There are five which are not exhaustive at all, as the convention text very clearly says. These are suggestions. These are suggestions that can be adopted, but by no means are ICH domains limited to these suggestions. Anyway, the point really being that the more evidence that we gather through meetings such as this, through exchanges of experience such as this, the better that foundation of ICH and climate change for the convention and for your own work will be. And I do hope that this sort of effort and this momentum will continue to be sustained in Mongolia as much as anywhere else in Asia, because truly we sorely need it. We have had a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot, we have had a, a fair amount of theoretical contributions concerning ICH and climate change. As I said in lectures 2 and 3, much of this has been based on the available evidence being that which comes out of member states or states parties like Mongolia, like China, like Cambodia, like Thailand, like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and so on. That means what these state parties submit to the convention secretariat, either by way of reporting on particular projects or particular programs or their statutory reporting cycles. So this being the case, what we do have is organized reporting, and from that we can extract some kind of evidence about ICH climate change, what it means, especially how communities understand it, what they do about it. But the problem therein lies that in between the submission and the um, digestion of these reports and what they contain, we don't have mechanisms to do what is needed to do. I mean, and you have to remember that, not that you have to remember, you experience it, but you have to, I think, make it a point to say what you experience, which is that climate change is not something that, you know, is observable at one point during the year, and then it goes away, and then it's observable at more or less the same point the next year. That, of course, doesn't happen. You experience different kinds of change and variation from one season to another, and at times, even several times within a season. And this happens very often, for example, with the Asian monsoons, where these effects can happen several times in a season being anything from 3 to 5 months. So, what we're talking about is a level of experiencing and also a level of adaptation and therefore coping, which is in real terms and on the ground, is far, far ahead of what is being reported about. What is being reported about. And this is something that I'd like you to think about with some concentration and also some clarity, because when you, that is, of course, from the point of view of cultural administrators and also from the point of view of educators, but also this is part of your role. You have a role as an administrator, you have a role as an educator, but you have a role also as part of a community, also as being either a practitioner yourself or in a supporting role to practitioners. So when you are able to gather this experience and present it in the context of both the ICH convention and the endogenous understanding and presentation of ICH, then that's where it has the best and the longest lasting effect. Now you may ask, best and longest lasting effect for who and to who? And this is the point that really is the subject matter of today's discussion with you. Lecture 4, that is today's lecture, has to do with the roles and responsibilities of all actors in context in attending to the previous 2 points. That means the previous 2 lectures that were given to you by me, lecture number 3 and 2. And these roles and responsibilities are, of course, related very much to the concepts of viability and sustainability of ICH elements. Now, since you have attended and participated in ICH workshops in the past, you know very well what is meant by viability and sustainability insofar as the ICH convention has named them. Sustainability is not to be confused with when we talk about sustainable, as in sustainable development and sustainable development goals. The sustainability in this case means what is it that an element needs in order to be able to be continued, to be expressed, to have a future. What does it need? And viability means what does it take to make it economically, socially, financially, and materially possible to continue doing this. So both these are put together because they go together. And when we are talking about roles and responsibilities of all actors, it means starting, of course, with community, starting with the practitioners, starting with the knowledge bearers, and then extending outwards in a conceptual, in a metaphorical sense, extending outwards where the ICH is at the center, the practitioners and knowledge bearers are at the center, and then outwards, that means administrators, educators, researchers, media, and of course, different levels of administration, moving from the very local to national, and then the jump to international or multilateral, which is the convention level, and the meetings of the organs of the convention and their partners in the UN system or outside the UN system, and so on. So that is what I mean when we say all actors. Needless to say, the roles and responsibilities at the local level are the most important because that is where you can show that different kinds of approaches and different kinds of solutions, um, where they are attempted and where they may be successful. You have to be realistic. There may be an equal chance that they are not successful or there is no visible difference. And if you change one or two parameters, maybe there is a difference. So it requires a certain uh, a certain commitment to durability, not that let us do it for one season or let us do it for 1 year. And then if we don't see results, let's drop it and go somewhere else. No, that doesn't work. It needs to be worked at for several years together to be able to see whether there is visible change, whether there is qualitative and quantitative change in the lives of the communities. So we are wanting to ensure that viability and sustainability of ICH elements is possible through climate change and climate variability and through the effects of climate change and climate variability. And because of that, then the especially the economic dimension of ICH then becomes self-sustaining to whichever extent possible. The more, the better. That really is the thumb rule over here. So the question is, when we say roles and responsibilities of all actors, who in fact are we talking about? Uh, Now, traditionally, what has happened and what has been happening is that we tend to locate the idea of ICH within the idea of culture. And because we do that, we speak to a cultural ministry or a cultural administration or arts and culture and different variations of the same. And what has not been done adequately till now, whether in our capacity building programs, whether in our pilot programs, or whether in our um, overall policy advisories to various governments and administrations, not just in Asia, but around the world, what we have still not um, been, I would say, successful enough in doing is to speak to all the other sectors. That means all the other traditionally named sectors which have anything, if not something, to do with ICH. And these are related directly to the point that I mentioned during lecture 3. This has to do with agriculture, cultivation, and food security. This has to do with water management, water in water bodies, wetlands, and so on. This has to do with forests. This has to do with grasslands and pastures. This has to do with a combination of these taken as a bioregion or a habitat or a biome. This has to do with cultural industry, as it is called, which you know, which is based very much on either a material craft, which is a material manifestation of the ICH, or it has to do in, excuse me, or it has to do with an expression or an art form or a gathering and event such as the observance of particular prayers at during harvest time and so on. Um, so when we are talking about any of these, then we are naturally also uh, requiring to be as part of the audience of our explanation of ICH and climate change, those sectors which are not automatically considered to be uh, culture, which means then Ministry of, for example, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Rural Development, Ministry of Small Industry, um, Ministry of Water Resources, Ministry of Education, of course, um, Ministry of Forests, and so on. So we are talking about a range of other potential partners who are already sensitized to climate change and climate variability, and who very likely already have running programs for their constituents concerning the effects of climate change. What does it mean by their constituents? For example, a Ministry of Agriculture will almost certainly have at least one program, if not more programs in a larger country, to help farmers and cultivators deal with the effects of climate change, which means in the form of either organized seed banks, or in the form of additional insurance, or in the form of technical assistance in order to enhance the forecasting of weather events, or in terms of the peer circle maintenance of best practices concerning, how to store harvested grain in inhospitable conditions, what sort of structures you need, what sort of materials those structures need. So everything from finance to technical to meteorological to insurance to supply chain and so on. And this applies to all these sectors. Now, typically, what has happened, or rather, the situation we find ourselves in right now, is that culture has somehow been left out of these discussions because it is culture. And what is required from you, uh, either as an intermediary or as a facilitator yourself, and by facilitator, I mean in the completely local sense, uh, which is to be able to convey the idea of ICH and what it stands for to the most local unit of administration, which has the power and which is empowered, especially budgetarily, from the budget point of view, to be able to make a contribution. So, but they need somebody to interpret to them and to translate to them what ICH means in the field and why it is important, and what climate change and variability has to do with it, and what mitigation and adaptation by ICH communities uh, have to do with their own programs. This is the connection that needs to be drawn at the local level, and then there is a great deal of advocacy that has to be carried upwards to the levels where policy, either at whether it's at district level or province level or national level, where policy is then formulated, or it is changed or edited in order to bring in what you need to be able to deal with ICH. So what I'm talking about here, based on quite a bit of, I think, quite a bit of field evidence going back not just in the strict or formal ICH area, but in the larger and older area of traditional knowledge, which is that when when I encountered any community that had a traditional knowledge which it was still practicing, and which it had inherited from generations in the past, but which for various reasons had come under threat, and those threats could be anything. Those threats could be a natural disaster, the effects of urbanization, the effects of migration, the effects of changing industrial and labor practices. Then these communities needed, if they so wished, and if they actually valued the traditional knowledge that they still held and practiced, then they needed aid and help in being able to navigate and negotiate this particular period um, in order to ensure the viability and sustainability of their traditional knowledge practice. For example, if in a particular region, grasses, certain kinds of grasses and were cut and gathered and turned into mats and rugs and wall hangings. And these were either used domestically or were used or were sent to cities in order to be sold as decorative items. And because of the effects of climate change and variation, the grasses either became scarce or they became of a quality which could no longer be woven in the way that they were. Then a particular kind of technical help was certainly needed, which means you needed to be able to bring soil scientists, or you needed to be able to understand whether the hydrography of that area had changed in any significant way, which was affecting the growth of these grasses and therefore affecting the production of these particular objects. So, what in fact this points to is that in being able to address threats, you have to um, and to be able to address threats with some degree of success, standing at the end of it, you have to be able to assemble a fairly wide range of assisting agencies or allied agencies. And these, especially in the context of climate change and climate variation, these are not agencies which have to do with culture in the way that the cultural administration has to do with ICH, but these are agencies whose programs affect the cultural communities. And because they affect cultural communities, naturally they have to be spoken to and made really part of the overall menu of solution providers. Because I think it is quite obvious that one agency having a program and a budget is still one agency. If you have half a dozen, then you have half a dozen with programs and budgets. And when those half a dozen have larger programs and bigger budgets than you do, then of course it makes all the much more sense to speak to them as well about what your ICH is, what the threats are, where climate change affects it, what is being done and has been done traditionally as coping strategies, as adaptation and mitigation strategies, and why their help to you will make their program more successful. This is a model that I have followed in various kinds of geographies. I would say with generally good outcomes, because at the end of the day, administrators do want to be able to make a difference, and they also want to be seen as having made a difference while they are in that post. And if you can give them the ingredients with which to make their job easier, which means that they are there to solve problems. They have budgets, they have resources, they have manpower, they have a mandate. When you are able to say that, look, here is a community which is affected under the criteria which they have a program for, and which you have a ready-made solution for, because this is what the community has always done under stressful circumstances, then they are, of course, going to be very interested in hearing what you have to say and finding ways to support you. And this is really what you're aiming at. Because, as I said, the effects of climate change and variability are way outside the scope of what a cultural administration is used to or is trained for. Others in administration in other sectors are specifically trained for this, and you must bring them in as allies. And this really is the central message of my discussion with you today, the roles and responsibilities of all actors. And I would very much urge you that you have to get used to the idea that, especially when we're talking about climate change and variability, the all actors part of it includes a much wider, much larger audience than those in the culture sector alone. In fact, the overall success or the overall achievability of your goals, and those goals have to be 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead of now, depends, though, that success and achievability depends almost completely on your being able to assemble a group of collaborating agencies and through them a group of partner agencies, supporting agencies, uh, which take an interest in your work, take an interest in the cultural dimensions as much as the ecological and environmental dimensions, and thereby begin to contribute through, it could be a range of programs. It could be 10, 12, 15 different kinds of programs. And each of those will have, for example, a program to ensure startup funding for, let's say, um, making design of a particular kind of textile tradition more appealing to urban consumers, but it needs startup funding because designers have to be brought in from somewhere. Or for example, a insurance which has to do with being able to extend insurance coverage for for objects that are in fact ICH objects, but which are then become products to those who never had insurance and never did deal with the idea of insurance. So these are the kinds of ways in which you I think you need to be able to widen the scope of safeguarding, which is very important because safeguarding itself, just like an ICH element, is not static. It needs to be dynamic. And in order to be dynamic enough to be able to deal with climate change and variation, it requires innovation on your part to be able to make the connections between what is needed, and financing is no exception. In fact, you will remember that last November, so November 2024 was the last global climate talks, and those were held in Baku, Azerbaijan. Um, so that covered the 29th meeting. That was the 29th meeting of the Conference of Parties, COP29, which was also the 19th session of the Conference of Parties to the Kyoto Protocol and the sixth session of the Conference of Parties to the Paris Agreement. So, in a few months from now, in fact, September, October, November, so 2 months from now, just over 2 months from now, there will be the COP30, the 30th in the series. And in COP30, I think what we can expect to see is a greater emphasis on adaptation. That is what it's looking like so far. And if that is so, then all the more reason why you should be able to think more creatively, more innovatively about adaptation and mitigation, which is what I talked about in lecture number 3, and present it to a wider audience, one which is outside the traditional areas of culture. And so this is where I will stop for this particular lecture. As with the previous lectures, this will also be accompanied by notes and references, which will be provided to you. Once again, my thanks to Prehab and to the host organizations and to your facilitators, Sarul Arslan and Erdenes Suvt Bayara, for being able to accommodate me in this way during your workshop. Thank you all very much, and good luck in your future endeavors.